But the Alexis Sanchez deal is, for me, the worst transfer in my lifetime of watching Man United. From sort of 300 to some people were reporting 450 grand a week at times in the newspapers, which I think was slightly wide of the mark. Months later, David De Gea walks up to Ed Woodward and says, he's on 350 grand a week. I've won 3 of the last 4 or whatever it was, player of the seasons for this club. And I want a new deal. Am I going to be on less than this guy? So then Rashford says the same. Bruno says the same. Hello and welcome to Uncensored, brought to you by Manscaped. My name is Joe, that is Jay, and what we're going to be looking at today, Jay?
We're going to be looking at the utter shambles that is Manchester United when it comes to transfers, when it comes to contracts.
Yeah.
And when I say transfers, that's incomings and outgoings. Not even post Alex Ferguson, I think. I think we've done all the Morgan Schneiderlins and Bastian Schweinsteigers of this world. I think we're going to focus more on the last 3 or 4 years and just look at what has recently happened. Obviously, Rafael Varane's announced today that he's leaving the club. Yeah. Not a massive surprise, if we're being brutally honest. But that's one of the transfers where, on paper, you look at it, you go, surely this is a good idea. Getting a player that's won the lot at Real Madrid when he's only in his 20s. Didn't quite work out, did it? Yeah. And it just feels like there's almost a curse at United. Well, it's not a curse, it's just a poor transfer strategy. Yeah. But we're going to be getting into it and hopefully explaining it. Yeah,
and looking a little bit under the surface as well at what is exactly going on, because I thought, not just, when INEOS came in, but even when Ed Woodward left, it felt as though we were going to be moving in a different direction. Everyone sort of made these little hints that we need to change things, we need to learn from mistakes, and we're going to look today and basically find out that we haven't done that. We haven't learnt from those mistakes, and we find ourselves another summer in some of the same situations and problems that we found ourselves in year after year after year. So let's get into some of the specifics. Let's start by looking at a very simple matter, player wages, and specifically the money that we put them on compared to their previous clubs. Because one of the big issues United have when we're trying to sell players, and we'll get into some of the net spends and, compared to the teams around us, our ability to sell players. Yeah. It's woeful. Yeah. I think Dan James is our 6th highest ever sale at 24 million quid or whatever it was. Like, we are ludicrously bad at selling players. Yeah. And part of that, or a large part of that, is the wages that these people are on. Look 100%. At someone like David De Gea. He was the most expensively or highly paid goalkeeper in the world. And because of that, his standards and expectations for finding a new club are probably different to someone that might have been on, what you would expect for an average goalkeeper to be on. Not that he was an average keeper, but, the salaries we're talking about here are some of the highest in the world. We have situations time and time again where you hear the phrase, X is interested in a United player, but the stumbling block is the wages. We hear it all the time with Martial. One of the reasons he's still probably here is those wages. So let's get into some of these wages and some of the contracts that United have offered over the last few years. So let's start, big talking point at the moment. Reports over the last couple of days that he could be leaving in the summer. Casemiro. Yeah. One of the most highly regarded players in his position in history. One of the best CDMs I've ever seen in my life. And then this season, he drops off a cliff. Yeah. Jim Ratcliffe sort of predicted this in a roundabout way, didn't he, when he was talking about this deal a couple of years ago or last year?
According to reports, it was one of the deals that he flagged up as being indicative of what United were doing wrong. Because on paper, you think signing Casemiro, especially when we signed him, we just lost the opening 2 games. You're bringing in a player that's won 5 Champions Leagues, 70 million quid, I think it was roughly, is a lot of money, but it's not unheard of. Yeah. And you're getting a player in a position you need, and one of the best players in the world in that position. However, like most of these transfers, there's a part of it that looks okay on the surface. You think, okay, it makes a lot of sense. Then when you scratch beneath the surface, it doesn't make any sense. You're signing a 30-year-old who's never played in the Premier League, who, just from looking at him physically, looks like the kind of player that might sort of struggle to get into his mid-30s at that level. Yeah. And you're signing him on a 4-year deal, I think it was, with an option for a further year, on a contract that makes him one of the best paid players in Premier League history. Yeah. That's insane. You've gone and got a good transfer and somehow made it terrible. Yeah. If you'd have signed Casemiro on either a 1 or a 2-year deal on, okay, you're not going to get him for pennies, but let's say 250k a week, you go, fair enough. Yeah. You get 2 years out of him, and even if it was 2 years with a further 1 year, that makes sense. But you didn't. You doubled that, and then all of a sudden it becomes insane. Yeah. And you're looking at you now, and you go in Casemiro. And I don't want to hate on him because he's been a very good player during his career and he was a good player last season. But he's not far off being useless for Manchester United.
Yeah.
I know he's playing at the minute, but he's playing because we've got an injury crisis in defence and he can play in defence. I think if everyone's fit, I don't even think he gets in the team. I don't. I think he's fallen off that much, and that would have been unheard of last season. And he's only in his second season at the club. Why is that? And why now are you looking at probably only Saudi Arabia as a viable option for him?
That's the mad
because
thing,
who else is going to buy him?
He's 32, which is obviously, it's not young, but it's not, it's, career done age really. You would think that there could be a couple more years in the tank. I know obviously the body shape and the style and all that is different to Modric massively. Modric, you could fit him inside Casemiro like as a suit. Like
I think they used to do that at Real Madrid.
They did.
To save money on flights.
Yeah, so they just get one plane seat, unzip Casemiro. Yeah. Modric gets inside, back in.
Exactly.
But do you know what I mean? The size difference is massive. He's carrying more weight. He's a bigger bloke. But Modric is, 37?
Yeah, he's
a phenomenon. Like 32, yeah, but you'd think usually 33, 34, maybe 35 is where you really see that big dip. And yet, the only places where he could probably go at this point is the MLS or Saudi Arabia. And one part of that is because maybe that's where his quality is at the moment. But the other part of it is United doubled his wages to 350 grand a week when he arrived. So when he was at Real Madrid, according to all these contract numbers are from spotrec.com. So if you want to go and check any of them out, that's where we're sourcing them all from. He was reported around £180,000 a week at Real Madrid. We basically doubled that to £350,000 a week at Manchester United, putting him on a sort of level footing with a couple of other players at the club as well. That is a massive jump up. And you now go from a player at 180 grand a week. Tottenham have got players who earn that. Chelsea have, Liverpool have, City have, Arsenal have. I mean, I would go as far as to say there's probably a few teams in the middle of the Premier League who have got players on around 180 grand a week. They're top earners.
Yeah. There
are a handful of teams in Italy who do. There's a handful of teams in Spain who do. There's a handful of teams in Germany and in France who do. There is almost no clubs in the world who have players on 350 grand a week. You're in the sort of top 5 teams there. PSG, I'm not even sure Bayern. I think Bayern do now with Kane, Real Madrid, Barca, and the teams above us in the Premier League. That's kind of it.
So what are you looking at there roughly a year in wages? We're saying 14, 15 million quid a year?
Somewhere in the region of 16, 17 million quid a year.
Maths isn't my strong point. So you're going, let's say 16 million quid a year. Yeah. Over what, 4 years? Yeah. So what's that, 64 million quid, is it?
Yeah.
64 million quid on top of the 70 million quid you paid for him.
Yeah.
Now I know you don't get any player for free in terms of wages. You're always going to have to pay wages. But let's say, even if we're being conservative, we lower it a little bit just to make sure my maths aren't completely out. Let's say it's 130 million or 120 million for a player that never played in the Premier League, is the wrong side of 30. And even if you just to look at it as a sort of logical aspects of it, it's such a gamble. Yeah. It wasn't like you were going out and spending 120 million quid on a Declan Rice who you know can play in the Premier League, has got at least 7 or 8 years left in him, and also probably has a bit of resale value. If you got 4 or 5 years out of someone like Declan Rice, or even Casado went for big money, he's not exactly set the world alight at Stamford Bridge, but he's a young man, he's a young player. Yeah. He's got some value, he's got some resale value, he's got some years left in him, Casemiro's got none of that.
No.
The best you can do now with Casemiro is get him off your books.
I know. And that's the problem. We've had this with so many players. Like, we got to the point with, some players who probably were good enough to play for United, or certainly were good enough to play for United. Paul Pogba. It got to a point where it sort of crumbled on the reputation that, you're a £90 million player or £80 million player who's on 250 grand a week. Like, these numbers matter in terms of the reputation of players. I want to just go through a list of some of the current squad players or recent squad players and the wages they were on when they arrived, and the wages we put them on when they arrived.
Okay.
Rafael Varane was on around 280 grand a week at Real Madrid, up to 340 United. I kind of get that one. It's too much, but we gave him a sort of, 20, 30% pay rise? By our standards, that's pretty conservative. Jadon Sancho was on around 55 grand a week at Dortmund. We put him up to around 250 grand a week, which is insane. Astonishing.
A 5 times pay rise.
Lisandro Martinez, around 20 grand a week at Ajax, up to 120 at United. Now that one, it's still a 6 times pay rise, but 120 grand a week is at the lower end of first team players.
That's the only reason that looks okay. Martinez is actually a good player. I know he's been injured, but he is a good player. There's no disputing that. And B, 120 grand for United, he's probably one of the lowest earners at the club.
Yeah.
but it's still a 6 times pay rise.
It is.
So it's still a lot of money.
A couple of others as well. Mason Mount went from around 80,000 a week at Chelsea to around 250,000 a week at United.
Again, like, he's getting, a 300% pay rise.
Yeah.
To come to a club. We've already had to spend 60 million on a player that was out of contract in 9 months.
Yeah.
And now we're giving him a huge pay increase. And okay, we didn't know he was going to get injured, but even so, it doesn't make any sense.
It's a lot of money, isn't it? And if we go back a little bit further, Anthony Martial, before he signed his most recent contract extension, was on around 110 grand a week. He's now on around 250,000 pounds.
Where was the jump there? Where was the justification? Well, that one season where he scored 23 goals.
I want to come back to that question in just a second.
Right, okay.
The other one that's a massive one, obviously, Antony. Not only did we pay £95 million for him, or €95 million, around just under 90 million quid.
€95 million. I'd be worried then.
Yes.
When you said pounds, I was about to think we'd have our pants pulled down.
You almost thought we'd overpaid for Antony for a second there.
That was a close one.
No. It's only €90 million, €95 million. He was on around 25 grand a week at Ajax. He's now on around £200,000 a week at United, an almost 10 times pay rise.
I spoke about this on the podcast the other day.
Yeah.
Why? What was the conversation with his agent?
But can I tell you what the conversation was?
That led to that?
I don't blame Antony for this whatsoever.
No, I don't.
But I don't even blame his agent. I don't blame anyone except Manchester United. No. Because what they will have said is, and rightly so, when you're trying to get your agent and yourself as much money as possible, because why wouldn't you do that? It's not his job to worry about the books at Manchester United. You will have gone in and said, Paul Pogba cost you around what I cost, and you gave him 290 grand a week. Casemiro cost less than what I cost, and he's 350 grand a week. Rafael Varane cost less than me. Jadon Sancho cost less than me. Mason Mount cost less than me. All of these people cost less than me, and they're on more than I'm asking for. How do you think I'm worth 90 million, but you don't think I'm worth 200 grand a week? And what can United say there? They can't say anything.
That's the sad thing.
They genuinely can't.
That is the sad thing about it, because United could have quite easily just said no.
Yeah.
And they should have said no to the transfer fee for starters.
Of course, that's the whole.
Yeah. As soon as Ajax went, well, he's going to cost you anything upwards of 30 million quid. You go, well, not for us. And part of the reason that Ajax were able to play hardball with Manchester United is because they already had a load of money that we'd given them for Lisandro Martinez.
Yeah.
So we'd help them be in a position where they go, well, we don't have to sell him because we've got the money that we need. So if you want him, you're going to have to pay loads of money to make us sell him, which we did.
They'd sold a handful of players already, hadn't they?
Yeah, not just Martinez, but
I think
he was one of them.
had gone. I think Tagliafico had gone. They'd lost 2 or 3 players, and they didn't need to sell anymore. No. And this is the problem. So, the wage thing is one thing, but it's intrinsically linked to how much we end up spending on players in terms of their transfer fee.
This is almost...
If Antony was 30 million, or 40 million, let's say, at a push, because it's United, let's say 50 million, right? Probably more than he's worth. But then all of a sudden, you start linking him to the Wan-Bissakas and the Dan Jameses and, people like that, rather than Sancho's and Casemiro's and Rashford's and Bruno's, because he's cost more than all of those players. So how could you possibly pay him a quarter of what Bruno is on, which is probably what he's worth, when you're paying twice the transfer fee? It literally, United put themselves in a terrible position by waiting too long, by not seeing that we're not going to be able to get any other targets, by not getting him at the start of the summer. Not only do you end up paying 3 or 4 times what we should in terms of wages, or maybe twice what we should in wages, we end up spending twice what we should in terms of transfer fee as well, which then is basically used as a stick to beat Antony with. We would, us as fans, and certainly opposition fans, would speak so differently about him if he was a £35 million transfer. He would. And the €95 million that we spent aren't even related to his value or his quality. It's related to our desperation. And all of that desperation that United have had, the lack of planning, the fact that we lost those first 2 games, all of that gets put on Antony's shoulders. And that's so unfair on him. I don't think he's good enough for United, but it's unfair to him that he costs what he did and that he's earning what he does at United. It's not his fault, but he has to take the blame for it. And he has to take all the pressure that comes with that. And we've done that to too many players. I almost feel sorry for Antony for that part of his game. Same way I felt sorry for Harry Maguire.
You might have a point as well, because we've seen the video of him spitting his dummy out and he's asked to play at left back. I don't know. I mean, I'm speculating. He might even want time with it. If you're a winger and you're on big money and you've cost a load of money and your manager's saying go and sit in defence, that might, I mean, I think he's got a bit of an ego anyway, regardless, but that might play into the idea of, well, what you putting me?
Yeah.
Your 80 million quid signing in defence.
Or there might be part of you thinking, I've got fucking haters to prove wrong here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get four goals between now and the end of the season, so I can at least say, well, I got this, that, and like double digits goal contributions or something.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do that from left back.
No.
Like there would be. I don't agree with Antony. You know, to be fair, he hardly squared up to Ten Hag, did he? It was less than Salah did. But clearly looking a bit pissed off at having to play left back.
I don't want to go down on a tangent, but we've seen it before. And you've got Christian Eriksen and Scott McTominay having to tell a player to go and do his
I don't like that.
In the middle of a game. Yeah. It's just so stupid. I just can't get my head around it. And I've seen much better players than Antony being asked to play out of position and not moan about it. So that is frustrating. But yeah, it might all time with it because these are all just silly contracts. And it feels like you almost need INEOS to come in now. You need new owners or a new regime to be able to say, we're stopping all this. Yeah. Because if it was still the same old regime now and you're a new signing for Manchester United, let's say in the summer, for example, I'm not saying we're going to get him, United went out and signed Ivan Toney. Ivan Toney, who's been in the England squad, he might look and go, okay, what's Mason Mount on? Yeah. What's Marcus Rashford on? Yeah. Well, I want that. What's Jadon Sancho on? Well, I want that. You know what I mean? That's my wages. My wages should be 250k a week. And I guarantee he's not on anything like that at Brentford. No. But he'll expect it because that's what other England internationals get at Manchester United. That's what other strikers or attackers get at Manchester United. That's what some of the players who we spoke to probably told him they're on at Manchester United. So why wouldn't it? Yeah. You've got to put a sort of marker down and say we're not doing it like this anymore. And hopefully with Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Dave Brailsford and Jean-Claude Blanc and Omar Barada and all these other guys who are involved, we can start saying, look, if you're going to come and play for one of the biggest clubs in the world, certainly the biggest club in England, then you're going to get good money. You're not going to be on pennies, but you're not going to be the highest paid player in Europe. And you know what? That's okay. Yeah. Like Liverpool have a bit of a ceiling. Mm-hmm. Even City say no to transfers sometimes. Remember Cucurella? Yeah. When it was like Brighton wanted, 68 million and City were like 50's our limit. Mm-hmm. Because they thought, right, that's what he's valued at. And he goes to Chelsea, don't really do anything. Yet United, we just keep going until we get the player. And it's never been a good idea for us. No. You said before about sort of where has this come from? Why have we got ourselves in this position? I think there's a couple of big names and big transfers that kind of have done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of finding ourselves here. We've spoken about it before, obviously. But the Alexis Sanchez deal is, for me, the worst transfer in my lifetime of watching Man United. Because not only was, he obviously massively underperformed. We never saw anything like the Alexis Sanchez of the previous season when he was at Arsenal. But the rumours were he went from around 140,000 a week to anything based on sort of incentives and bonuses from sort of 300 to some people were reporting 450 grand a week at times in the newspapers, which I think was slightly wide of the mark, more like 350 grand a week. And at that point, I think he was the highest paid player in the Premier League, certainly Manchester United's highest paid player. And what that did, because we got him for essentially free, even though it was a 30 million swap deal with Mkhitaryan, but really that was just for fucking, we will put that on our books, you put that on your books. It was essentially a swap deal. Because we got him for cheap, we put extra money into his wages. But then months later, David De Gea walks up to Ed Woodward and says, he's on 350 grand a week. I've won 3 of the last 4 or whatever it was, player of the seasons for this club. And I want a new deal. Am I going to be on less than this guy who's not performing, who isn't a Manchester United legend, who hasn't been player of the season the last 2 of the 4 years? And obviously at that point, United went, oh, fair point, we'll put you on what he's on. So then now you've got a goalkeeper on 350 grand a week. Then when Marcus Rashford and Antony Martial, who's your top scorer, by the way, the season after, Martial comes in and gets 23 goals under Solskjaer, and he goes, I'm on a third of what our keeper's on when I'm our top scorer. Okay, we'll give you 250. Okay, then he goes on loan to Sevilla because he's not scoring. They wouldn't want him anyway because he didn't do very well. But no one can afford to give a £25 million striker, whatever we'd get for him, 250 grand a week. So then Rashford says the same. Bruno says the same. Like all these people who are getting their contract renewals are saying, David De Gea's on that because Alexis Sanchez was on that. What are you going to do? Give me a quarter of what our keeper's on, who, by the way, at this point, is now on a bit of a decline. Like, we painted ourselves into such a horrendous corner.
And not all of it is Alexis Sanchez's fault, and it's not his fault anyway. Not all of it is Woodward and the Glazers' fault for that single deal. But that one for me was a massive change, because the renewals that came after that were absolutely bonkers, some of them, weren't they?
Yeah, you're right. They were, and like you say, it's like that domino effect. And and I don't want to put it all on Sanchez, but that was such a seismic error it was. And listen, as a fan, I fell for it. He was going to go to City. We got him. I honestly thought at one point he might be the missing piece of the puzzle we needed to challenge for the title, and obviously I couldn't have been more wrong, but I wasn't alone in thinking that. And then, like you say, it just leads to other players wanting bigger deals. It looks like everyone's sort of comparing it to what Sanchez has got, and also you broke through that ceiling of, oh well, we've almost not got any limit now. It's like you go, well, that's the limit. Well, actually, we've gone through that, so you can just sort of demand what you want to demand. And then we get into this sort of fear factor / FOMO, where we don't want players to leave. We're worried that if they go, they're going to do bits elsewhere, or, well, we've got them now, we can't possibly let them go, and they've had a little bit of a purple patch, and they've done really well. So, by all means, we've got to do everything we can to keep hold of them. We've got to keep hold of these players no matter what. And it just gets a bit silly sometimes, because you're giving players who have done all right, or they've had a good spell, or sometimes they've just had a good few months or a good season, and you're giving them new contracts with huge pay rises, and sometimes extensions as well, where it's not just about the fact they're getting a pay rise that's making them one of the highest earned players in the history of football, but you're giving them an extension for 3 or 4 years in some cases. And I mentioned this the other day, like Nemanja Matic, he was in his 30s. He had a good spell around Christmas and New Year, I think it was. Came on against City in the Carabao Cup semi-final, did really well. Had a few good games, had a little bit of momentum, and I think, okay, this is the match we thought we were getting from Chelsea. Let's give him a new deal. Why? It's ridiculous.
Right, I need to stop you there, because this podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, the global leaders in below-the-belt grooming, and they have done it again. They've brought you the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, the latest in trimmer technology, and that comes within, Jay, the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra.
I'm always amazed at how Manscaped deliver.
You've done it again.
They literally deliver, and you get free shipping and 20% off with the link in the description. But also, the way they just dare to dream. They don't just dare to dream, they make those dreams a reality. I thought the Lawnmower 4.0, which is excellent by the way, was the pinnacle. Well, I was wrong. The 5.0 Ultra truly is magnificent. And also, for people like me, who, yes, we like change and we embrace it and we say it's good that technology is moving forward and things are getting better, we also like the things that we like. We're traditionalists. And that's why you've still got the things you love from Manscaped.
Well, you've still got, on the Lawnmower 5.0, you've still got, a fantastic general trimmer blade. But now you've got the foil blade. There's 2 blades on it. You've got the foil blade that can go smooth wherever you want. And like you said before, using the code Paddock20, as you can see right there, the code Paddock20 will get you 20% off and free shipping. But Jay, we've talked about the lawnmower. We've talked about the performance package. What else do we get in there? Because just one item by itself ain't much of a package, mate.
Yeah, well, don't you worry. You've got the crop soother. You've got the ball toner. You've got the shed travel bag to put everything in. You've got the boxer briefs. You've got the weed whacker for the nose and ear hair. Men of a certain age, it's something that affects us all. I've got no hair on my head, but I've often got hair on my nose and in my ears.
You also get,
thankfully, it's the weed whacker and get rid of it.
Sorry, you also get the boxers as well as the ball deodorant. Not just the toner, but the deodorant. Genuinely, it is the only thing I have used downstairs for years, and I love it. I've never once considered going elsewhere. And some of the stuff I used to use, I had this old clipper that was a £5, chewed me up like someone at a hot dog eating contest.
Right, okay.
Just the skin going into it, like, you know those machines where you sit
in the papers.
Yeah, exactly. You're bleeding onto the papers most of the time. Absolute nightmare.
It was grim.
But with Manscaped, you don't have to worry about any of that. And like I said, with our code Paddock20, you get 20% off and free shipping. Make sure you go and check out Manscaped. Thank you once again for sponsoring the show. Yeah, we there was a few of them. I think we mentioned it before, but the Eric Bailly one, I can't remember the exact numbers, but basically he came in, played well the first season. Then a couple of seasons later, when he'd not been playing many, he's like 15 games here, 20 games there. He signed a new contract sort of out of nowhere almost. And then I think it was something like 12 more Premier League games later, I think it was a year later, and he made 12 appearances or something like that. He signed another extension, having barely played since the last one. And I don't think the money was anymore, but like we gave him 2 contracts in 2 years, and he'd barely played in the meantime. Like just absolute nonsense ideas. Now, looking at other clubs a little bit, like look at Liverpool for instance, who I think, people talk a lot about their transfer dealings and the fact they've been a lot more successful with the money they've spent than we have, clearly, and their sort of biggest transfer fees. 8 of their 10 record signings are still at the club and regular members of the starting 11, which is obviously, it suggests that they haven't wasted as much money. I think a couple of the big standouts that weren't very good, Naby Keita was like 60 million. He didn't last long. But the rest of them, Szoboszlai, Alisson, Darwin Núñez in the top 5, Virgil van Dijk obviously as well, are some of their most important players. Whereas you look at some of United's with Lukaku, Di Maria, Antony, like these are huge money signings. Jadon Sancho, another one, who 75 million quid, one of our most expensive players ever. Paul Pogba signed his deal, ran it out and left. They've hardly become club legends, have they? Like
no.
Some of the fees we spent on these people, and then almost none of them have been massive successes. Almost none of our top expenses have been huge successes at Manchester United.
I'd argue that none of them have. I don't think Bruno Fernandes is one of our top signings in terms of the fee we paid for him. You look at our top signings, you've got Lukaku, you've got Paul Pogba, you've got Harry Maguire. I mean, how many of them have been Angel Di Maria?
Yeah.
How many of them have been successes? Like, they might have had successful periods or they've been good players at times. I mean, Paul Pogba was one of the most talented midfielders I've seen. Was he a success at Manchester United? No. I think he was. We won 2 trophies in his first season and didn't win anything else after that. I'm not saying that's all on him.
No.
But some of it is.
Yeah.
He faxed it in the Europa League final just before he left. Like, those are the kind of games you need him to step up in. And the FA Cup final in 2018, I think it was, he didn't do much better. So there's that. Harry Maguire, I think he's had a lot of good games for Manchester United. He's obviously won a trophy, won the Carabao Cup with Manchester United. Has he lived up to an £80 million fee? No, not his fault, arguably. But if everyone's fit, he probably doesn't even get in the team. Well, he might now that Rafael Varane's leaving. But not a huge success. Angel Di Maria, a disaster.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, did quite well at the beginning.
Yeah.
By the end, he's catching the ball when it's still in play and he's getting moved on for a loss.
Yeah.
Lukaku, on the paper, 42 goals in 96 games, looks all right. But when you scratch beneath that surface, 1 goal against the top 6 in 2 seasons?
Yeah.
Like massive purple patches and then barren spells.
Yeah.
More or less giving 2 assists to Manchester City in the derby, which ended our title race in November? I mean, not a great signing.
No.
So I'd argue that when we've gone big, don't get me wrong, Liverpool sometimes hasn't worked. Núñez, the jury's still out. He might not be a good signing. Alisson worked. Van Dijk worked. They're big signings that they were able to sort of take that punt on, though, because they know they've got a very good team and they're just throwing in the goalkeeper because that's that missing link. They're just throwing in that centre-back because they've already got a pretty solid team. They just need that world-class centre-back they've been chasing for a few years as well. They've been scouting. We wanted a centre-back last season. We didn't get him. Let's go again and get him this season, but we'll spend an extra 30 million because his value's gone up because he's had a good spell with England. It's insanity.
Yeah, and it just points to the lack of joined-up thinking at United, doesn't it? Because the other thing you could argue amongst those players, I think Paul Pogba, it was very expensive, but he was the most highly rated young midfielder in the world when we bought him. The fact that he cost 85 million wasn't much of a surprise to me. It's a lot of money, and you can look back and maybe say we paid too much, but the fee was sort of in line with his trajectory as a player, wasn't it? But you look at the others, Maguire was clearly not worth 80 million.
No.
I think when we bought him, a lot of us could see quite plainly that we'd overpaid there and thought maybe it'll be okay. He's probably worth 50, 60 million and we've gone for 80. Okay. Antony was clearly not worth that money. Like, some of these big signings that we've made, it was clear when we bought them that they weren't worth what we paid for them. And I think that whenever you're in a position where you're buying someone, in the back of your mind you go, it's not worth this. But what other choice do we have? That lack of other choices is down to the club and down to the scouting and the decisiveness and the ability to trust in the decision making of the CEO, the technical director, the sporting director and the scouts and the manager. You should never be in a position where you know you're getting rinsed for a player and you do it anyway. Like you said with Man City, they don't do that.
No, like, I hate Man City, obviously, for a multitude of reasons. But they do have limits. They were linked with Pogba, and apparently they were put off by the fee.
Yeah.
They will obviously. I mentioned Cucurella. There's Sanchez is another one.
Fred was another one.
Sanchez. I used to do a lot of the Manchester City press conferences at the time, and the word around the campfire there was that Sanchez to City was a done deal. It was going to happen. Everyone was saying it. They're getting Sanchez from Arsenal. That's going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's just when. And then United usurped him, not because Alexis Sanchez was desperate to come to United, but because we gave him more money. And we made it a deal that was attractive to Arsenal by giving them Henrik Mkhitaryan. So they got, I think, a player that's sort of a different type of player, but an attacking player. Yeah. And Sanchez got a load of money, and there's probably money involved as well. So it made sense. It was a deal that was appealing to them. But in terms of what he brought to Manchester United, was very little. And City looking at it going, thank goodness we didn't get him.
Something else I want to talk about is the players United have missed out on in this time as well. And all clubs miss out on targets.
Probably more depressing than the ones we've ended up with.
But some of these were sort of done deals almost, that whether a manager changed their mind or something happened, that these players have all gone on to be wildly successful pretty much to a man at other clubs. So Tony Cruz, this is going back a long time, but we'll come to present day. Tony Cruz, the deal was all but agreed, reportedly, by Moyes and the team at the time. Then Van Gaal comes in and says, I don't fancy that. He goes to Real Madrid and is one of the greatest midfielders in the history of football. I think he's won 5 Champions Leagues, 4 La Ligas, is widely considered one of the best passers of the ball that anyone has ever seen. Like, he's still doing it now at the age of 34, week in, week out for Real Madrid, got him to a Champions League final again this season. He probably wouldn't have had the support to do that at United, but he certainly would have been a decent signing, wouldn't it? Another one is Hummels from Dortmund. Went to the deal was, I think, largely agreed. Ended up going to Bayern Munich. Now gone back to Dortmund. Is in the Champions League final again, playing against Toni Kroos. Gundogan, another one, was linked so heavily with United that I remember where I was. I was at my mate Lloyd's house in the back garden. Sky Sports notification came through my phone. Manchester United have agreed a deal with Borussia Dortmund for Ilkay Gundogan in the region of around £30 million. 2 weeks later, he signed for Man City and went on to be one of the most clutch, sort of big game players that club has ever seen in a time where they've been the most successful team in England. Like De Ligt, another one. He's had a bit more ups and downs at Juve and at Bayern, but he's playing in Champions League semi-finals, and he's won the league, I think, every season of his career for the last 3 or 4 years up until this season. And then another handful, Frankie de Jong, another one. We tried to get him, couldn't get him. That was slightly different because I think we did all we could there, and he just didn't want to leave. Harry Kane, we never really went for him. The manager clearly wanted him this summer, and we didn't really go for him. We ended up going for Højlund, who very promising, but Harry Kane, I think, has scored 3 times the amount of goals that Rasmus Højlund scored this season for Bayern Munich. And then that other one where Ole Gunnar Solskjaer says, I've got this lad Erling Haaland here who's sensational. Okay, we'll wait, we won't go for him. Okay, now he's at his next club. Before he goes again, we can get him again for a bit more than last time. No, we still don't fancy him. Okay, now he's at Dortmund and he's clearly one of the best strikers in Europe. It's too late now. City are going to get him instead. Declan Rice, another one. Camavinga, United could have swooped in there as well, but never really pushed for it. And obviously Jude Bellingham's the final one where we had him at Old Trafford, showed him around, gave him the whole, here's Sir Alex, here's Brian Robson, here's the history of the club. And for one reason or another, couldn't get that deal done either. But
just with all of those, you can see how the sort of the mistake and the error almost solely lies with the club.
Yeah,
doesn't it? It's like there's one or two where you can go, okay, like with Tony Cruz, you might blame Louis van Gaal, but forward planning, when a player's or a manager's gonna want a player. Like City did when they got in De Bruyne because they knew Pep fancied him. So you can maybe put that one on Van Gaal a little bit, but the club should have had better planning. You look at the Gundogan one, why didn't that happen? You look at the Bellingham one, I think maybe we did all we could. Haaland, we could have got him twice. We could have got him, and we didn't. Declan Rice, we probably could have got him if we'd have gone a little bit bigger than we were willing to when he was still at West Ham before he went to Arsenal. Maybe a season or two before that, we were heavily linked with him. We didn't. Camavinga, there was a time when we could have got him for what, 20 odd, 30 million.
It was a very small fee.
Very small fee.
Yeah.
And he's a player that's done well at Real Madrid and helped them win a Champions League. I mean, the club have dropped the ball so many times on players where they're just on that cusp, a lot of them as well, of becoming great. You can see it. You can tell with certain players they've got something there, I mean, loads of people were predicting Declan Rice was going to do bits in the Premier League. You could see it at West Ham.
He was doing it.
Yeah, and he's gone on and he's done that, and now he's bringing Arsenal to within a whisker of a title. Jude Bellingham, we all know about that, slightly different. Harry Kane, the most proven goal scorer on the planet, and we didn't really try and get him. We sort of looked at it and thought, oh, we wouldn't mind him. We'll do something about it then. Yeah. And maybe there's a pathway as well where you can go, don't buy Mason Mount, don't buy Rasmus Højlund, go out and just blow Spurs out of the water with an offer that they can't refuse for Harry Kane. Spend 120 million quid on him or whatever. Just blow Bayern Munich's offer out of the water. Just get Harry Kane. It's such a different season if you've got Harry Kane. I'm not hating on Rasmus Højlund or Mason Mount. Two good players who are going to be longer term. But Harry Kane is one of the best goal scorers the Premier League has ever seen. And you had the opportunity to get him. And you went, nah.
Not bothered. We'll get Antony.
We'll get, we'll get someone who's on a free transfer in 9 months, but we'll get him now. And we'll get a kid who's played, one really good season in Serie A. Or one decent season in Serie A, and he can come in as our only striker because that's fair on him.
Yeah, and also I mentioned Antony erroneously there, but if we'd have spent 45 on Antony, the money for the next window is higher. You have more to spend the season after. We could have probably got all three of them if we'd have spent what Antony was worth rather than what we got for him. If we'd have got Casemiro for maybe 280 grand a week and maybe 50 million, that's probably saved you 60 million between those two things that you can just stick on Harry Kane.
It's insane as well, some of the PR around these moves. I remember when we signed Casemiro, and I read an article where after the Brentford game he'd rang United or rang his agent and said, don't worry, tell him I'm still coming. Like, I'll be there. Of course he's coming.
I can fix
this. I'd be willing to go to play for anyone for 380 grand a week. But he was thinking, I'm not asked if they're getting beat. I've never even heard of Brentford until today. I'm not bothered. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to go there and get me dough, and I'm going to get a massive signing on fee as well. Happy days. Yep. And it's still one of the biggest clubs in the world. There's very few clubs you can go from Real Madrid to another club and it's not much of a downward step in terms of the size of the club. Yeah. United are on a similar size to Real Madrid. So this whole PR, same with Mason Mount. I remember reading articles where it's like, oh, it shows United have turned a corner because he signed Mason Mount for 55 million quid instead of getting our pants pulled down. The kid was free in 9 months and he's played, 12 games or something, or maybe a few more, but not many. I know, again, injuries, you don't know he's going to get injured. But it's not like it was a coup getting a player out of contract in 9 months for 50-odd million quid. A deal that Chelsea were happy to sell him for. If it wasn't that good a deal, they would have said no.
Just looking forward a little bit to this summer, because obviously the sort of logical conclusion of this chat is, how do we bring the wages down? How do we stop these errors happening again? I said this the other day. Casemiro, Rafael Varane, Jadon Sancho, Anthony Martial. Those four could leave United, and unfortunately for Casemiro, even though he's the only one that's playing out of them, his performances have been such that you wouldn't notice any of them if they'd gone. No. And you've saved over £1 million a week there on wages. Yeah. That has to happen, doesn't it? We know Varane's going. We know Martial, it's not confirmed, but all reports are that Martial will leave. I can't see a world where Jadon Sancho stays. And Casemiro, the Saudi rumours are starting to grow at the minute as well. Those four is just a tap-in almost, isn't it? Do you think that there'll be any others? Do you think there'll be any other sort of, obviously, the other high earners? You're looking at Marcus Rashford, Bruno Fernandes. Obviously,
Luke Shaw a high earner.
Luke Shaw's relatively high earner. I think something. I think we might have had the data on there as well, so we can just have a look at that quickly.
Because Luke Shaw is someone
in the region of £180,000 a week.
Right. Well, that's a lot of money for someone who's injured all the time as well. I don't know. Maybe there is a big money or a big name player that does get moved on that isn't at the end of his United career in terms of his age, and you'd think he was still a first team player, but you end up selling him because it's like, you know what, there's a new regime now. We're just not having players for this amount of money. The difficulty with that is getting rid of him. Yeah. Because a lot of these players as well. Let's say you're INEOS and you go, Luke Shaw, he's always injured. He's on silly money. We need to get rid of him. Mm-hmm. Who's buying him then? Who's giving him that money? To the point where he goes, okay, I'll leave. Marcus Rashford is another one. Everyone keeps talking about Marcus Rashford potentially leaving. Maybe he goes to PSG. Seems that PSG aren't really interested in him. I think that's cooled a little bit. But if you're going to sell Marcus Rashford and he's on, 300k, some reports a little bit higher than that a week, who's paying that for a player who has had 2 bad seasons out of the last 3? Yeah. It's just not happening. No. So unfortunately, and I'm not digging out Shaw and Rashford, but some of the players you might even think about moving on, you can't.
Yeah.
Because it's like Phil Jones is the example. Why was Phil Jones here for so long? Why was Phil Jones here past his testimonial year? When he wasn't play, he didn't play for Manchester United for about 2.5 years. Why? Because he was on silly money. And I don't even blame Phil Jones. People go, he should have just left. He should have gone to DC United or wherever else he was linked with. Why would he? Why would he take a massive pay cut? He's got a short career. He's been injured loads. When he can just stay here and get a contract that he signed. That is literally a contract, an agreement between the player and the club. So the player's honouring it by staying. Yeah. He's not breaking it.
No. If you're a builder and you sign a deal to put someone's driveway in and they say we're going to give you 50 grand and you finish it after 2 days and they budgeted for 2 months, you're not going to say, here's most of that money back because I'm not really that useful anymore. You go, we signed the deal.
Yeah, that's
you wanted me for 5 years. Here's the fucking money. Give me the money. Like, no one would do that.
No.
And fair enough, we might think we would because we're fans and because we love Man United and we don't get any money from Man United, so we're not used to that dynamic. But these are employees.
I bet you wouldn't as well, right? Say that. I know your point. Like, you fans, bet you're using training watching some of these players tossing it off. You'd go, well, no, I want the money that I'm earning.
Exactly. It's easy to say that when we're sat here.
Can't be bothered.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
I want my money. So yeah, I think that it goes back to the original. It's the club. It's the club's fault. I don't blame a player signing a deal that is extortionate. He's getting the most money he can get. Every player in the history of football has done that. I don't blame an agent for trying to get his client and himself or their self the most money they can get, because that's the agent's job. The agent's job isn't to work for the club and save the club a few quid. The agent's job is to get as much money as humanly possible for their client. So don't blame them. I don't blame the selling clubs. If Manchester United come calling to Leicester and say, we'll give you 80 million for Harry Maguire or whatever, it's not on them. It's on Manchester United. It's our own fault. It's people like John Murtaugh and Ed Woodward, who were playing Championship manager with our football club, have left us in this utter mess.
Yeah. Right.
That was a cheery one.
It was nice.
Absolutely put me in a positive mood after the loss to Arsenal.
But I think this is a big.
What's next? United's best injuries.
Yeah, probably. I think this is a big topic though that really needs fixing if United are to be a successful team. Because I think a 40 million Harry Maguire and a 40 million Antony, their reputation is so different that we'd see that Maguire signing as a success now. Maybe Antony's slightly different because I know the quality's not there, but Harry Maguire, I think, has played probably somewhere in the region of 60 good games.
You always say it, Joe, and you're right about like them sort of 30-40 million pound players that are out there that you get. City are a good example. I don't know the exact figures, but they get some of those middle sort of range players. Like they've done it a couple of times with Portuguese players, like with Silva and with
like Nathan Ake's.
Nathan Ake. I know they've gone out and spent big money on Jack Grealish, whatever, and you know they kind of get away with that, even though he's not set the world alight. He's done enough, but they have bought, like say Nathan Ake or Kanji or whoever. Liverpool done it with the odd one with Robertson. I think was a bit of a bargain. There's been one or two others where obviously Salah was the ultimate bargain. Yeah. But United just don't seem to do it. No. Don't seem to get that right. Bruno's the only one where we've not paid massive money for a player and he's been mint. Yeah. And we need to find a few more of them. It's not unheard of, and I think that's why a director of football who knows what he's doing, has his contact books and his scouting reports, can be a massive help for Manchester United. Absolutely. Right. Thank you once again to Manscaped for sponsoring the show. Make sure you use the code Paddock20 at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. That link is in the description. Thank you, Jay, for coming on. This has been Uncensored. We'll see you in a bit.